One of the questions that I've seen pastors, potential pastors, and planters asked is to do with the size of church that they think that they can lead, that they have faith for. And different people will give different answers around what they think they've got the gifting and the capacity to carry in terms of the size of a church, and that will also, I think, factor into that their expectations of what's permissible, what sort of a size of church is it right to be seeking to pastor. So there's all sorts of things going on there. And that will be cultural. So I think in the United Kingdom, you don't want to be heard to suggest something too small, because that might suggest that you are inward looking. But you don't want to go too big, because we're not into that kind of big church culture of the United States. So as part of we don't want to be trying to create mega churches here. We think that there are issues with that. I would probably agree with that. And also, we don't want to sound too proud, do we? We don't want to sound as though we are arrogant on this, or that we are over ambitious for ourselves, for status, and so we tend to pitch it somewhere in the kind of the medium sort of church range. What I want to suggest in this video is that when you're thinking about what capacity you have to lead, what sort of size of church you could lead, then it is likely to be both much smaller in terms of the number of people that you can lead, but at the same time, much bigger than what you think and what you say you can lead. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to just dig into an incident in the Bible. It's a famous one from the Old Testament, and actually this is going to help us think about a number of things around church leadership, church growth, and church multiplication. And the story I'm thinking of is this. It happens during the Exodus. So you remember that Moses is leading the people out of Egypt. And I think it's around about the point when he's at Sinai, when the law is given, that he meets up with his father-in-law, Jethro. And Jethro watches as Moses is there from dawn to dusk, hearing the complaints and questions and challenges and cases of the people. And he basically says, Moses, you can't go on like this. This is going to wear you out. Jethro sees that this is going to overburden Moses, but also it's going to overburden the people, because Moses is becoming a bottleneck for justice, a bottleneck for protection, a bottleneck for wisdom and being fed with God's words. And that's something that we've got to be alert to as leaders, particularly those of us that are elders in the church, that we don't become a bottleneck for those things. And so, Moses says, so Jethro rather advises Moses, and Moses follows through on this, that what he needs to do is to start to delegate out, in effect. That what he should do is he should ensure that rather than people coming straight to him first of all, that they first of all go to someone else. And so the people are divided into clans, first into families and then into clans and then into tribes, and by these sort of numbers and groups, and people are made chiefs and heads over those different numbers and different groupings. By the way, I think it's probably worth observing that A couple of things there. First of all, that will be following the natural grain of things within the people. The families, the clans, the tribes already existed. And that will also mean that in terms of these people being appointed, there's a sense in which they were already there. What Moses is doing is affirming and recognizing the authority and the position that they already should have. And often there's a sense of that with leadership and eldership in the church, isn't there? That what we do is we affirm and recognise what is already there in terms of gifting, and we make official and avert what people in the church can already see. But the crucial thing is this: how many people could Moses really lead in terms of giving real depth of leadership, in terms of being properly invested in their lives? Not that many. And perhaps Moses, because of his character and his charisma, and because of his experience and his reputation, could lead more than some other people. And that's going to be true in church life as well, that some people will be naturally more outgoing, find it easy to build relationships, will be able to carry a level of authority in larger groups, and will be trusted because of their experience and their reputation, because of their longevity. Particularly if you've been an elder or a pastor in a church for 20, 30 years. But there's still going to be a limit. And it's probably going to be a lot lower than what you actually expect it to be. But actually Moses could lead this huge nation, many thousands, hundreds of thousands, million plus people. Why? Because he wasn't doing it on his own. Now there's two things there. First, I mean, just the obvious, he wasn't doing it on his own, because God was the true leader, the true head of the people. And that's something we need to keep coming back to in terms of our gospel culture. It seems so obvious that it shouldn't need to be said, but I think those obvious things do need to be stated and made overt from time to time. This is a spiritual thing. We're not on our own. It's not just our human efforts. But even still, there seem to be particular patterns in terms of how these things happen spiritually through the power of the Holy Spirit, through his presence with us. And that means that there is the point that there is leadership together, which means that we can accomplish far more than we could on our own. So Moses is never actually on his own, is it? Because right from the start, God places Aaron with him, and now we see this expansion of leadership. Now, just a couple of other things to say here in this video before we finish off. First, that there are a lot of lessons to learn here about kind of structures in church life, things like small groups, things like multiplying congregations, and those kinds of things that we can talk about in another video at another time. But I want to keep the focus here on the less than you think, more than you think kind of question. And so some key things. One, that when we're thinking about leading the whole together, it isn't as simple as going around and asking each person or observing each person and saying, you're able to lead and look after 10 people, you're able to lead and look after 20 people, um, you're able to lead 50 people, and then adding it all up. So it's not, hey, you've got 6 or 7 elders in a church, and they all have the gift and the capacity to be leading a church of 60, 70. So that means that, that means, well, it's a church of 300 or whatever it is. I'm doing the math very quickly off the top of my head here. The sum of the parts is going to be different to actually what the whole is. And that might mean that actually, when you look at who you can lead together, that's a lot more than simply adding them up. Or it could be that it is less than adding them up. And those are things that you are going to have to work out in terms of thinking through all the factors involved. The other thing to recognise is this, that you are not asking everybody to cope with everything. So let me make that explicitly clear. What I mean by that. You will have people who will really struggle with the idea of what comes with a church of 100, or a church of 200, or a church of 300, or even a church of 50. Because there's so much that comes with that in terms of the busyness, the pace, the complexity, the challenges. And they may not be able to cope with everything, but that doesn't mean that they have to be part of it, and it doesn't mean that they have to be able to cope with the full thing in order to be involved in leadership, in spiritual leadership. Because there are people with different levels of capacity and gifting in the people of Israel in that incident, aren't there? There are the people that can lead a family, there are people that can lead 10, there are people that can lead 50, there are people that can lead a whole clan, there are people that can lead the whole tribe and have oversight of hundreds of thousands of people. Just as Jesus tells a parable of servants, and one is given 5 talents to steward, and one is given 2, and the third is given 1. I think it's a similar one where they're similar parable where there are different numbers allocated, aren't they? But what you see there is that we don't have to all be operating at the same level. But you do need all of those people involved. And what that means is that the nation of Israel wouldn't have worked as a nation, and things would have come unstuck for the people and for Moses if those people who were saying, we've got capacity to look after 10 people, we've got capacity to look after our own family or clan, but don't ask us to get involved in leading tribes, if those people were removed, if they decided, well, you're not up to it, so we don't need you, well then the whole thing would have fallen down. So hopefully there are some things to get you thinking about, maybe some things to talk about with your team, core team, if you're church planting, your leadership and eldership team, if you are existing as a church, in terms of what capacity do we have together and what do we have faith for together as a church.